Welcome everybody to another fun-filled episode of the SPS DAOn Hall. I will be your Claiborne this evening, and or I guess this afternoon, or maybe morning, depending on where you're at.
Maybe evening.
Yeah. You're whatever time of frame of reference you're existing in at the moment. And I'll be joined by PJ if you couldn't tell. So how's it going, PJ?
Good man, how you been? How are things in your part of the world? I know you guys are still recovering from an earthquake. We had an earthquake like right after you,
Yeah.
right? We had like a 6.0 here in California. I don't know if you saw the video with all the elephants down at the San Diego Zoo huddling
Yeah, man.
around. It's kind of,
Look, that stuff's
you see
crazy.
that?
Yeah. Man, we live on a crazy planet, man.
Oh yeah. It's just a lot of exciting stuff happening across the board, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, things are going good. Can't complain. Things are looking good on our front from the Jupiter side. We've had quite a bit of time now running validators, so everything is looking all quiet on that front, which is amazing. We're starting to see, um, just kind of the long tail now of the initial release for validators, which is really good. And then before we started the stream, is it okay? Can I share the link with everybody?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Uh,
Just
Okay, yeah.
drop it in the
So
town hall chat.
in the town hall chat, okay. Real quick, dang, I saved another link here. Let me go back and grab this one. You can visit spsdao.com, and we put up a website for the DAO. Basically, for the most part, now because we have validators set up, and because we're starting to work more towards the DAO doing real governance on top of the token, it's going to be really important that we create our methodologies for managing communication as well as displaying information for third parties, right? And this is something I think you have had a lot of bearing on as of late, or actually you've been doing it with Royal, I think, for the last 2 years now, secretly behind the scenes trying to make sure everything was working correctly and all the numbers added up, or as they would say, if you guys ever seen Wayne's World Part 2, you want to cross the T's and dot the lowercase J's. But yeah, so website's up. It's got some information about the SPS token right now. A couple things need to be updated, and then obviously we want to make this more dynamic, so it's actually looking, um, it's actually pulling live data because right now everything's pretty much static for the most part. And then I'm going to work on some of these visual effects too, because right now it looks like it's shooting uh, confetti everywhere, and it was supposed to look like fire. But and then the GitHub link is actually broken because I was an idiot and pushed it without fixing the GitHub link. So I apologize, but that'll take you to the validators, and then we'll have a link to the validators website on here too. But yeah, just ultimately, like, the DAO is its own separate thing. It needs to have its own capacity to manage its communication as well as what information it puts out about the SPS token. So I think this is a good first start and getting us on the way. And then hopefully we can kind of dive into why this is important. Maybe some of the stuff that you've been working on too, Clay, behind the scenes,
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
helpful to kind of lay
Yeah.
the
So,
narrative here.
I don't know. Sometimes, like, I feel like I should probably do a better job of talking about all the things that I work on, but like, I don't know. At the same time, like, I'm one of those people that's like, I would rather tell you when it's done, and like, I think some of that
Sure.
just stems from like, I don't know, like working in this space and seeing like, so much stuff just devolves into win, 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 right? So it's like the I don't know. I guess like I've just like at this point, like I like to
Maybe.
help manage expectations. So like in general,
Yeah,
like I'll
less
tell
hype
people,
and
right? Like just like
less
in
hype, more
general,
action, right?
right? Like I'll tell people like what I'm working on, right? But like so right now, like one of the big things that I've been working on, ever since we got that proposal passed, and like honestly, I guess I've been kind of like working on it for a while before that. we're trying to get payment processing set up for the DAO, so that basically what you'll be able to do is like somebody will be able to come in and like use their credit card or use like their bank account and just like interact with one of our third parties, and then you can get SPS delivered in game, right? Which um, you know, with Splinterlands existing on Hive, it's slightly more complicated. There's more moving pieces, but I don't know. Like I said, I feel pretty confident we can get it done. It's just like right now we're kind of like going through the motions. Like there's anytime you interact with this stuff or like with exchanges, there's always like a lot of legal review. And that's kind of what I've been dealing with for the last couple of weeks here. Is like we've done everything we can do on our side. We're waiting on legal review. I've got, I'm trying to work on getting Ramp Network set up, which is the one that the DAO like had a proposal for and like approved funding. And I'm also working on a backup plan, let's just say, where I'm in pretty deep talks with a different company where I'm trying to get us a free listing, which will basically it'll be like a bit of redundancy in my opinion. It's kind of like this is a problem we have whenever you look at like right now. It's I think Transac is the name of the company, which is who has
Yeah.
been kind of like our. What would you? I don't even know if like you would really call them like our payment processor. Like, doesn't it really work by like they basically do Hive and then like we kind of like have a hacked solution on the back end to like convert it and get get those tokens. But basically, like what I'm trying to do is get us native support, right? Like, and ultimately, like a lot of these companies, a lot of these, yeah, it's like they don't really care about Hive. You know, what I mean, like that's the best
Yeah.
way I could put it. It's like Hive is kind of like it's seen as like I don't know, it's just like it seemed like almost like it's like not worth their time, right? Because like they can integrate EVMs so quickly. Like once you get set up with like one EVM, it's very easy to roll out more EVMs, and then like you have access to all the tokens, all the projects that are on all
Yep.
the EVMs, right? And it's like Hive itself tends to be in a bit of a silo, right? And I actually have some friends that work with Hive. I've been part of the Steam Hive ecosystem since pretty much like it launched. And it's something that like we've been like working to kind of like overcome. But ultimately, like this is all stuff that kind of like adds up to getting us where we want to be. But long story short, I'm working on trying to get us a couple of payment processors set up. If we can get past the legal hurdles, which is part of like why we have a foundation set up now, why we have a website set up now, there's basically like there's just like a lot of steps in the process, and I feel like we're getting pretty far along now. Like they're at the point where they're reviewing our website, they're reviewing the legal
Yep.
stuff. So as long as like no major hurdles jump up at us, then I feel like we're probably good to go. But again, like I said, I'm one of those people that's like I would rather just like not say anything until it's done, and then just like let you guys know, hey, it's here. But also, I work for the DAO, and I realize like you guys want to know what we're working on, so that's why I'll try to do a little bit better talking about this stuff. But again, like I feel like talking about it, and then like if it doesn't happen, then it's just like you set people up for disappointment. And it's a wild card, right? Because like whenever you're interacting with these other companies like this, like it's really out of our hands, right? Like, I mean, their lawyer can,
100%.
for whatever reason, their lawyer can just be like, GameFi seems risky, you know? And then, like, yeah, like that's literally all it takes is like they could just have like a legal opinion that says, we don't want to risk it or we don't want to deal with it. But again, like these are companies I've been talking to for probably like 6 months now at this point. So I don't know. I feel like we're pretty good. I feel like we're pretty far along. But again, just I'll add that disclaimer until it's done. I can't promise you anything, but I am doing my best to make this happen.
And definitely second how much of a pain in the ass it is to work with payment providers and trying to get an on ramp. Because we would, you know, oh God, what was it, 2023? we had PayPal move their risk portfolio away from gaming, right, which caused all kinds of problems for us. Yeah, oh god. And it's for no reason. They're just like, oh, hey, our risk profile has changed. Sorry. And it's like, okay, well, you gave us all of about 7 days notice. Thank you for being so responsive and letting us know 7 days before you completely cut off our on ramp, right? And then the other problem is it's not just about like what chain you're on; it's also about what countries can be served through the banking process, which is also a big problem. And there are a couple solutions that have to act as what we call like a smart router for payment providers based on your location. And if you're able to actually fund that transaction through a banking application. And Transact is just one of many payment providers, right, or on ramps, but you actually have to have quite a few in order to be able to service a broad area. And they change all the time, and they change their capacity to service crypto all the time. And if that, how much time are they going to actually invest in a one-off chain like Hive? It makes, especially if it's just for Splinterlands, then you have to have volume that makes it worth their time. And I think that also kind of leads into some of the stuff that I want to talk about with you, Clay, in just a little bit. But we do have some people commenting, yeah, what are banks, right? uh, yeah, that's actually a great question. There is a little bit of response here, and I think OAA actually had a really, really good point here. The web page looks good, but when's the white paper going to be updated to include the SPS burn to DEC? That's arguably the most fundamental economic feature at this point, which I agree. We need to probably start managing the communication around the SPS token and doing more frequent updates around the core of it. Matt originally put most of this stuff out. So we do have to go back and just kind of make sure that the communication is on point. But hopefully that will be one of the points and one of the fundamental operations of the DAO itself is to manage the communication around the economics uh, of all of these different assets that we have, or for the most part, just SPS right now. But hopefully that will continue to grow. But yeah, so again, this is just kind of a first stepping stone for us to put some stuff out regarding the DAO, make it a little bit easier for people to find us and to understand what's going on, and to kind of concentrate a lot of the communication around what the DAO is doing. Again, I'm not a member of the DAO, but I'm here to serve the DAO. So I think ultimately, feedback is good, but we need to consider what we want to do next and start to think about how this ultimately plays into a bigger and better future for SPS token in general, right? So with that being said, having fiat on-ramps is a major part of what it takes in order to bring new liquidity in that's not typically crypto liquidity. But we've also had some conversations and a little bit of development work that has been going into crypto to crypto bridges, basically, for the most part, which is something else that I wanted to talk about and why the importance of having bridges available is super key. And then also a little bit about marketing, or not marketing, but market making for SPS token and for DEC. But yeah, so hopefully this website, like I said, we last month, I think, or the month before, we had launched the SPS validator site, which is just a WordPress site that we gave access to DAO members to be able to just update. This one for the DAO is just a little bit more designed out for marketing and for appeal. Doesn't really have, it's just, like I said, it's kind of like the first piece to a larger narrative here. But yeah, I think it's a really good step forward. We knocked this out. Obviously, these aren't traditional Splinterlands communication, but looking forward to doing some more work like this too. It's actually a lot of fun working on these things. But yeah, so I hope you guys like it. Feedback's always welcome. but yeah, anywho, I got a couple things, Clay. I hope you don't mind if I reel it back in that I
Yeah,
wanted to touch base on regarding some of the stuff that I think is going to be. Well, first off, and just kind of lay out a roadmap here. Um, Fiat on ramps are extremely important, but crypto to crypto and chain to chain on ramps are actually extremely important as well. And I would say, at least in the crypto space, we are a bit cut off from the rest of the ecosystem. And I know a lot of people who are a part of this understand that Splinterlands needs to expand its user base, right? And there's two ways that I kind of look at this and try to understand what brings in people to the community. The first one is just obvious. The game has to be fun. People got to want to play it, right? And I think that with the new inclusion of different ways to play, like hardcore mode, are definitely moving us in a direction that makes the game more exciting and more appealing because there's more options and there's different ways to observe the way to play, and obviously earn rewards. But the other part of that is actually making value, right, and creating value. Um, and I know a lot of people probably got into Splinterlands when the asset prices were much higher. Um, and we've seen a lot of uptick in prices as of late, mostly due to Conclave Arcana, but also because we've just been releasing a lot of new ways to, uh, use assets. Obviously, we're knocking out a bunch of different stuff. Now that we're kind of two organizations, we have Jupiter working on like the validator side, and then we have Splinterlands, which is releasing its own updates to most of this stuff. And then obviously we have like Cryptomancer in the middle who's working on land, right? But there's a lot of things that the community can do that I think would be really helpful and really great opportunities. Granted that they knew a little bit more about how decentralized finance works, about how markets work, and about how assets and values are kind of tied to each other, or why you see a lot of movement between different assets on different chains. Like if Bitcoin's doing good, 2 days later Ethereum will do really really good, and then everything else starts to do very well. But we don't ever actually see any of that interpret to SPS, right? It doesn't really, like, even though Bitcoin may be jumping up 20 or 30% in a day, we don't see any of that convey over to Splinterlands and to SPS. And there's a good reason why. And I can probably dive into a little bit of this if you don't mind. And don't let me ramble on here, Clay. Hopefully, I'm not going too deep already. But um,
oh no, I
yeah,
mean, I would say this is the point of like what we're here for, right? Like we need to get the point across about how to like properly approach DeFi. I mean, the DAO has plenty of assets, but like we're not really capitalizing on them. And then we also need to look at like where are points in our ecosystem that are basically like net extraction that could easily be handled by the DAO. I mean, like the DAO basically has a team of developers like on the payroll now, right? Like we should be able to do
yep,
things like take over, like our own bridging, for example. And, like
exactly.
I think that this is probably one of the most important conversations that we really do need to get across, right? Because like this is something that like I really started trying to like hammer down. You know, I would say like over a year ago, whenever I started like trying to basically like explain to people, like how the LPs were set up, how the DAO could be providing liquidity, and how the DAO could like actually be making money on its liquidity providing. And just like ultimately, it's like we do a lot of things that kind of like counteract our own interest. So yeah, I mean, to me, like this is mission critical. So yeah, like hopefully everybody here wants to learn about DeFi today.
All right, excellent. So I don't know if a lot of people know my background. Um, and hopefully I'm not like this isn't a flex, but I just want people to have a little bit of faith in what I'm saying, because I'm not just off the streets trying to pitch an alpha group or something like that. It's not my intention at all. But basically, I teach a class at the University of California, Irvine, under Professor Dave Carlson at the Palmer School of Business. So these are all finance majors coming out of UCI, right? It's probably one of the more prestigious like business schools. Yeah, that's me right there, Clay Wood. And also, I just want to say, Druid's Blood Fugazi is like one of my favorite bands too. Love it. I don't know if that's what you have on there, but I was gonna sing a Fugazi lyrics. I am a patient boy. I wait, I wait, I wait, I wait. All right. So, anyways, back to the topic here. I also developed a analytics company that was funded by the CME, a bunch of different high frequency trading firms. I was a world leading analyst for cryptocurrencies way back in the day. When I say way back in the day, it's like 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. My work was featured twice at the World Economic Forum. And I also published a bunch of really, really great papers and videos on how to track and trace whale movements. I'll post some of this stuff in the DAO Hall chat for you guys to take a look at. Basically, a lot of the stuff that we were doing was observing. So what we would do is we would basically graph out all of the different wallets across different blockchains like Ethereum and Bitcoin. And then we would use personification layers and clustering to basically go through and identify all the different wallets that behaved for different types of trade activity, right? So it's basically like creating a credit report for every wallet on Ethereum for different types of personified activity or heuristic activity, right? So like we would create a heuristic that says venture capital. This is what venture capital looks like based on the transaction types that happen between wallets. And a clear indicator of venture capital is they deposit early Ethereum into ICOs, right? And so there's two different types of wallets that typically do early deposits, meaning pre-ICO deposits. The first is going to be team members and founders. And then the second is going to be investors. And those early investors are how you classify venture capital. And you can tell the difference between team members and investors because the investor wallets will be linked to other ICOs, and you'll see them deposit funds across multiple projects versus a team member, which is usually only depositing in the one, right? And then you'll see the token distributions that go out after that. And so one of the things that my team did early on in order to understand all this stuff was we basically identified all of the early venture capital wallets and clustered them all together. And then I went and bought a copy of Crunchbase, all of the data from Crunchbase. And I basically took all of the tokens that these wallets had invested in and found all of the investors on Crunchbase that had matching profiles for those investments, and I found all of their wallets. And then the joke was at our company, first was the name of the analytics firm, which was Financial Resources, Statistics, and Technology. But the joke was front-running slower traders, right? Because in crypto, if you can see everything, and it's what we call like basically the Nancy Pelosi effect. Like she doesn't have to be right. If enough people follow you, you'll just always be right, right? So the idea here is like if I say, hey, Clay is the best crypto trader, which we all know is true, right? Clay's Alpha Group. Then it's just a matter of how fast you move. That's it. And that's why, again, the acronym was FIRST, because we were always the first. We always saw this stuff before anybody else, right? So ideally, what would happen, like I also came from Influence before I was working on this stuff. We were a huge analytics firm called Speaker. I was the CTO of that company, and I quit to basically pursue this. And basically, one of the things that I learned was it doesn't matter if I'm wrong, it doesn't matter if I'm right, just how many people believe me. And that is what we call reflexive market making. And I have a white paper that I drew up about this. It's pretty basic, but it's also the emphasis behind how markets move and why they move. and how alpha is shared amongst alpha groups. If anybody here is a part of an alpha group, I would say get out quick, because they're usually just pump and dumps, and don't pay attention to that stuff. But you can use very simple fundamentals to understand how these markets move and what makes them move. And then, really kind of the idea behind it is we have these things called data-driven narratives, which allow us to look at information and use that information to craft a story. And then that story is basically what people share, right? Because people can't necessarily understand the information or interpret the information, but they can tell stories. And that's kind of what humans do. It's what we call social currency, right? So if you can tell people a story, they can take that story and they'll create many different variations of it. But each time they tell it, the fish gets a little bit bigger, right? If you know what I'm saying. And the reason that they do that is because typically they will take a position themselves in the market, and then they'll want somebody else to believe that they also have an opportunity. And that's what leads to the greater fool theory. And then if you really want to dive into the deep fundamentals of this, there's Alchemy of Finance was written by George Soros back in 1984. That's a Intrepid Surfer. I'll answer that in just a sec, but that's a great question too. The Alchemy of Finance, 1984. They quote this thing called market reflexivity, right? Market reflexivity is really just about how the market is driven by the perception of the market by third parties, right? And people, if let's say Clay, who we all know is the best DeFi trader in the world, decides to sell his tokens because maybe he needs to go on a vacation, right? Well, if I don't know that, I'm going to interpret it as Clay is getting out of a position because he thinks something bad's going to happen, right? So what do? I sell everything because Clay sold his tokens. And then everybody sees me and Clay sell our tokens, so everybody else starts selling their tokens. And what happens is the market crashes for that token. And why? Well, because Clay needed to go on vacation. But we don't know that, right? It's just the fundamental. Now we observe something without understanding the cause and the effect, which creates the perception, and that perception drives the market. Therefore, because Clay was the first to move, he's always right, right? And so that's what happens. That's the Nancy Pelosi effect in markets, right? So everybody thinks Nancy Pelosi has insider information. Why does she make so much money? Because everybody follows Nancy Pelosi because they think she has insider information. She doesn't even have to be right. She just has to do something, and everybody will react because that's what everybody believes. It's also what happened with all the people that held from Wall Street Bets that bought into GameStop, right? All of a sudden, they had a narrative driven by one guy who had basically a base understanding of how something should work, and he just strong-handed it the whole way through, and more people began to share that narrative. So, Intrepid Surfer, this is one of the reasons why I was hired here at Splinterlands, is because I understand how to do this stuff, but we haven't had time to actually work on these things until just about now. I'm going to share some more information with you about things that I've passed around since 2022 internally in the company, which were all things that we wanted to do, but just didn't really have an opportunity to do. And if you guys haven't noticed, almost my whole entire career here at Splinterlands has been finishing other projects that were started before I got here, right? So validators being a key one, it's taken years, right? But now we are at a point where new things are starting to happen, and these are basically the set paths that I think we need to start thinking about, because I can tell you just a few people can drive a market in cryptocurrencies and crypto land, right? And I think the output is fundamentally something that nobody here would ever expect, which is great. So my background, I hope, gives you guys a little bit of insight here. I'm not some cheesy little day trader. I've been doing this. I've launched billions of dollars worth of different assets for different companies. I've been doing this for a very long time. I've helped develop contracts and taught contract and market making for things like Uniswap v3, Uniswap v4, and Uniswap v2. which is probably still the most used decentralized exchange application. In my class at UCI, in a single hour, what we'll do is I'll launch a fork of Uniswap on a chain, and usually we just use test chains right now. And then I go to a website that I created, which is kind of cool. I'll give you guys a link to it real quick, and you can check it out. This is part of my original crypto group that I started, which is mostly an educational group called tkxx.cryptomonks.io. And if you go to that URL, I'm not going to steal your wallet credentials, so don't worry. But it'll allow you to mint any token on any EVM chain, and you can just use it to create your own tokens, basically. And it'll just launch the contract, and you'll have the tokens automatically deposited in your wallet. And if you don't believe me, go on a test network, put some test ETH in there, and you'll see it connect to your wallet. You put in all your token details, and you can just launch your token, and it'll automatically deposit, however many in the total supply you want to put. And I use this as an example of how to make markets, right? So what I'll do during that class is we'll launch a copy of the exchange, right? And then I'll go and mint two tokens. I'll mint one that represents a stable coin, and then one that represents a volatile asset, right? And then what I'll do is I'll send out all the I'll send out all the stable coins to all the members in the class. So there'll be like 50 students or 60 students in the class, and I'll get all their wallets ahead of time. So I show them how to set up a MetaMask and everything else, right? And then I'll send out the tokens to them. And then what I'll do is I'll take my volatile asset and I'll create a liquidity pool. And then what I'll have them do is go and trade their tokens for this new volatile asset, right? And so we'll call it like test USD for the stable coin. And then we'll have our volatile asset, which we could have like test SPS or something like that, right? And they'll go in and they'll start trading on this new exchange liquidity pool that we've created. And they'll learn how markets are made, basically. And there's a couple different ways we can make markets. And we've done some of this. Clay, you and I have actually done some of this on creating what we call like a single-sided position in a liquidity pool. And I'll go in and I'll actually make the market, and these students will go and start trading back and forth. And then sure enough, with like 50 or 60 people, you'll get to 1,000 transactions really, really fast, right? The volume will start to pick up, and you'll see the pool start to earn fees because people will buy tokens and sell them back, and they'll start doing some market making and creating some volume on these tokens. And then finally, at the end of the class, what I'll do is I'll just rug the whole project. And I do this as an example of how these crypto scams work for the most part. Not saying that that's what I'm trying to do here, but basically I'll just dump all of my volatile token into the pool, and I'll take all of their stable coins out and show them like, look, that's why you don't trust basically like junk tokens when people create them, kind of like what that girl Haley Welch, the Hawktua girl, did and her team did to all the people that were putting money into the pool, right? So it's basically a class on market making, but it's also a class on how to identify scams, right? And who are doing the scams and how to identify the wallets that hold all the tokens. And there's a whole operation that we go through that does a little bit of research so that you can do some fundamentals and see, okay, based on the size of the pool, based on how many tokens there are, what's the opportunity versus what's the risk, so on and so forth. But clearly the idea is to show how to make a market and how markets work, right? And these are, just some of the stepping stools that we use in order to teach this stuff. And I think so far I've had like on the DeFi side, like the non-college education side, like just doing standard stuff, I've had over 5,000 students who have gone through basically all of our DeFi market making stuff. And then in college, it's about another 1,000 students that I've taught who are all finance majors. So it's really fun. It's a really exciting class. I'm hoping that we can actually do some of that stuff here and teach people a little bit more about how decentralized finance works, about market making, about liquidity pools, the different types of liquidity pools and positions that can be made. I know that we don't have, there's probably a handful of people who are a part of Splinterland's, who probably understand how most of this stuff works. Other than that, like they don't understand how fees are made or how liquidity is provided. But basically, there's some really, really good opportunities. And so, sorry if this is a bit long-winded, but you guys get an idea of kind of the breadth of opportunity, and just kind of, I guess, just to give you a little bit of faith and confidence in my capacity here to help teach this stuff and help people understand that there are a lot of opportunities with SPS token and DEC that just aren't really taken advantage of. And these are some really good opportunities. And I've kind of been watching patiently from the sidelines, trying to get other things done. But I feel like now would be a good time because this is one way to on ramp new people into the Splinterlands community, and it's not necessarily based on gameplay. And I will stress that having a fun game is ultimately the number one thing that we should focus on, but also having the ability to make markets and to participate in the success of the token, I think is going to be hyper important because if you look at Splinterlands and you look at SPS token and you look at DEC, I think that what's the market cap right now on DEC? It's like $900 million or something like that. It's crazy, right?
No, definitely not
No, it's not that. No,
that.
okay, sorry, I'm tripping. Like I saw, or maybe sorry, maybe it's not. Yeah, sorry, I think SPS is like what 20 million or 19 million. Maybe I'm tripping. I
uh,
haven't looked in a minute.
SPS currently, I would say, is like around 20 million. I mean, it really depends on if you want to go fully diluted or not. But like fully diluted, I think it's closer to 37 to 40, depending on the price. But like right now, I'd say like we're in the ballpark of like 20 million market cap on SPS. Um, and, guys, I want to clarify something here, right? Like, so PJ and I have kind of like talked about this stuff like off and on. But I do think it's also important to like keep in mind that like a lot of this stuff isn't really things that like the company can or should focus on, right? Like this is stuff that the DAO should be focused on, right? So again, like obviously I think PJ and I would both have preferred we started like moving a lot of this stuff sooner. And again, like it's one of the reasons why like I was originally pushing for like we need to have the DAO start moving into these liquidity pools, just things like that. Like the DAO has like so much just like sitting around that's idle that we don't really do anything with, right? And like especially now, we're kind of like coming to the point where we've ultimately like we have to start doing something, right? And like I can look and I can see how much basically just how much funds are being bled out of the community by the current like bridge setup, right? I mean, like it's thousands of dollars usually a day, like between all the bridges that are just kind of like getting eaten up by third parties, and that's that's ultimately just sell pressure like on our whole ecosystem, right? Well, like if we move forward in a way where we have like the DAO setting up its own bridges or like the community setting up its own bridges, we can basically have that value just like captured within our own ecosystem, right? And then if we start looking into ways to basically like bridge out into new chains or to create new pools with new positions, this is one of the I guess more like I don't even know if I'd call it like high level things, but like basically like one of the things that I feel like we as a community have like ultimately failed to do is we should be looking at expanding our DeFi presence in a way that we're basically paired against more tokens, right? And the reason to do that is one, like it basically allows the DAO to diversify its holdings a little bit, which I know a lot of people like, but like the big picture idea of like what this does is it allows us to create a situation where there's more volatility against the token, right? And that's ultimately what you want, right? Because like people like to talk about exchanges, people like to talk about market cap and all of this. But guys, like if you don't have volume, you don't have anything in this industry. Volume is literally everything that anybody really cares about in this industry, right? Like if you're trying to deal with market makers, if you're trying to deal with exchanges, if you're trying to look at partnerships, you don't want to have a highly illiquid token, right? And currently, like one of our biggest problems is we do have volume, but it's all like basically siloed off into Hive Engine because there's no trading fees or like super low trading fees on the liquidity pools, and none of that volume gets tracked outside, right? So like you can go look at, like the SPS tracker like on CoinMarketCap, right? And you're gonna be like, oh man, this token was doing like $50,000 in volume a day, or like even recently, we were getting up to like $250,000 of volume a day whenever we were like starting to see that price action leading into Conclave Arcana. But again, like if you take that like small little snapshot of like what the outside world sees, I can guarantee you it's more on Hive Engine because it always is. Like I'll go look at Hive Engine just to see how much volume we're pushing through it, and I'm like, it's just like it's like damn, like if the world at large knew how much volume we're actually pushing through this community, then like I feel like the token would be in a much healthier point. But yeah, like so I think that's something we have to focus on, right? Like I mean, ultimately, I guess like it's a DAO decision. The DAO can vote and do what it wants, but I mean, like if we really want to like grow the token, if we really want to have a healthier token overall, we have to start looking at ways to expand, and we have to start looking at new pairs. And again, I think we should also be looking at ways for the DAO to basically make bridging into new chains super easy, and that's one of the things that PJ and I have been talking about a lot. What do you think, PJ? Am I on the right
Yeah,
talking points here?
100%. Yeah, yeah. And sorry, I was looking at the fully diluted value of DEC at 1 trillion tokens. It says that the token's FDV is 975 million,
Yeah.
which is nuts. But yeah, that's yeah. I apologize because I was just ripping through that real quick. But Clay's right. So volume is really kind of the key thing to all of this. So yeah, so ideally what would happen is first you need to have basically liquidity in I've talked a little bit about this. We have a lot of liquidity stuck on Hive, right? There's a ton of liquidity that is basically stuck on Hive, and Hive doesn't necessarily have the strongest market, right? And I'm not talking about independent markets that are on Hive. I'm just talking about Hive in general, right? It's considered a smaller chain, right? It doesn't typically trade in the top 100. So that being our base layer for transactions, although it's great and it's an awesome chain, it's just not one that's speculated on very heavily and doesn't necessarily translate very well to people who are used to EVM-based chains or Ethereum virtual machine-based chains like Ethereum, BSC, Polygon, Optimism, right? Arbitrum, Cello. There's a bunch of them. So what that means is it's just not easy to transfer, like connecting a MetaMask wallet and just moving between different exchanges isn't something you can necessarily do on Hive, right? And so you have to think about something that we in the retail space would call share of decision, right? The share of decision is where are all the eyeballs and what percentage of the eyeballs do these chains take up? Well, Hive is very low comparative to all the other chains, especially when it comes to the amount of volume. So Hive is not popping up in the radar of any of the LP providers or the liquidity providers because it's not transacting enough, right? So the share of decision for Hive is extremely low, right? But even though on Hive we may have a ton of volume, the community is technically very small compared to a lot of the other chains. And mind you, I love Hive, right? This isn't a dig on Hive by any means. It's just the fact of the matter is that you can copy EVM machines and launch your own chain in about 10 minutes, right? Hive is a little bit harder and a little bit more costly. So with that being said, bridges are the first way to uh, communicate or sorry, convey value, right? That means to move value from one place to another. So ideally, we would basically have part of validators, and part of what we set up on validators is the capacity to manage bridging, right? And so I think the next key to this is developing open source bridging, which individuals can manage and launch their own bridges. but the DAO will manage the primary bridge because it has most of the liquidity. So the DAO will be able to use its validator node to basically manage bridging between Hive and any of the other chains that SPS token can be delegated to. Currently, that's Binance Smart Chain is the primary one, right? So on BSC, we have our pools on PancakeSwap, and I think there's one on Uniswap, and there may be some left over on SushiSwap. But for the most part, the pools on Binance Smart Chain are mostly relegated to just the PancakeSwap pools, and we have a couple there that have quite a bit, almost about $1 million worth of liquidity available between SPS and DEC, right? So there's quite a bit there. And we've done some of this in the past. We had a DEC pool, which, to be a little technical here, we had basically a single-sided position for DEC and USDC that did very well. And it earned a lot of fees. I'm not sure how much we generated in fees, but it was quite a bit, which was great, right? And that's just all we're doing is we're providing liquidity to the market so that people can buy tokens and trade tokens. One of the reasons that we don't see the value of SPS and DEC move when Bitcoin is moving is because there's no independent markets to transact against those assets. And the reason that that's important is all of DeFi, all of decentralized finance, like the core thing behind DeFi is automated market making, right? Which is the ability to put two assets in a pool and earn fees based on people trading those assets back and forth, right? And Uniswap was the first real large DeFi exchange to take off, although there were other ones that came before it, which were automated market making versions of this. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Clay, for sharing that. If you guys are seeing on the town hall text chat, you just put that in there. But the reason that all of these, oh, sorry.
Just to say, total, we've made about $42,000 in fees, right? And like that's not nothing. Don't get me wrong, but like we could be doing way better.
We could be doing way more. Yeah, like 42 grand is pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Like it's working, it's doing its thing, it's providing liquidity. People are trading, right? Which is awesome. But we could be doing way more. And granted, this would also help the token prices. So what I wanted to come back to on this though is the reason that assets move you'll see a lot of parallel price movement across assets is because of the way that automated market making works and arbitrage. The key to continual price movement between automated market makers is arbitrage. And there's actually a few different forms of arbitrage. But the key component here on Uniswap, PancakeSwap, SushiSwap, or any of the swaps is basically what they call triangular arbitrage, right? And that's trading two assets with a third-party intermediary asset based on the price, right? So you can actually trade from USDC through SPS into Ethereum, or let's say wrapped BNB or wrapped BTC, because the price is just favorable compared to all the other tokens available in pools. So what eventually happens is they say, rising tides lifts all ships. That is absolutely true when it comes to triangular arbitrage, because based on the price movement of the primary asset, which would be something like Bitcoin, at some point, after all the other assets have moved, the last asset will have to move because it becomes the cheapest amongst all of the asset pairs in an automated market making platform, right? So meaning that all assets tied to that core asset should start to see some upward movement, because at some point it cycles through and it becomes the cheapest, right? Now, what that percentage is just varies, right? It also varies based on liquidity and the fees and everything else that goes into it. But it's not like somebody's sitting there and picking these and hand picking which asset to move. It has nothing to do with it. It's just math. That's all it is. It's just math. And everything in any kind of swap platform like Uniswap, SushiSwap, PancakeSwap is all based on something called bonding curves. right? And again, I don't need to go too in depth here, but basically it's just math that says find the cheapest way for me to move from asset A to asset C using variable B and make it as cheap as possible, right? And that's what happens. The bonding curve automatically sets the price for the tokens. The smart contract automatically trades on that. And that's how arbitrage happens. And it just happens automatically. You don't pick, it just happens. It's all based on math, right?
Right.
And so if you look at all of the different asset pairs that we trade against, there's only like 3 total. That's it. There's not a lot. So I noticed that one of the pools that we had, and I forget which one it was, I'd have to look on PancakeSwap, but if somebody wanted to do their due diligence and run through the APRs on the V3 pools on PancakeSwap, you'll come to find out that some of the APRs are in the like, you know, over 100% sometimes, right? Meaning that if you were to park liquidity in there, and granted, it's probably for a short period of time, you could actually make a really healthy APR just by parking liquidity in a pool. Now, there's caveats to all this, obviously. There's things that you have to be aware of. Impermanent loss is one of the primary things that happens in automated market making, meaning that you will always end up with the cheaper side of the pairs if you don't maintain your pool. But it's also a great way to move in and out of positions without slippage. So like if you're familiar with what slippage is, if you're dumping a bunch of coins for some reason, like let's say you think that you need to exit a position and you don't want to basically lose any of the value because you dump it all at once, then what you do is you create a single-sided pool on Uniswap V3 and you set a really tight tolerance on that pool or a very tight range. And as people trade, they will trade you out of your current position and into another position without causing any slippage. Plus, you'll earn some fees for doing that, right? You'll earn anywhere from 0.01 to 1% of the fees based on how you structure the pool. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do with these tools that are available, and everybody here actually has access to all these things already, but it's just a very limited number of places that you can actually do this. And what's crazy is that anybody in our community can actually go and create liquidity positions for any other token on BSC, on Binance Smart Chain right now. So like if you wanted to create a wrapped Bitcoin pool, there's nothing stopping you. If you wanted to go and create a wrapped Ethereum pool, there's nothing stopping you. If you wanted to go and create an Ondo pool versus SPS or Render pool versus SPS, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. Anybody can do it. Anybody can now take a position in creating markets for SPS token, which is, fundamentally what should happen, right? We should start to see these things happen. I think that's where I'm going to start actually putting a lot of my value and time and effort outside of what I do here is to just make liquidity positions, because I can earn a better yield or a better APR doing that than I can on a savings account, high yielding savings account. It used to be back in the day when I was working on Uniswap V3 and we were making concentrated liquidity positions, which is, again, it's kind of a mouthful here. I would get APRs that were 3,000-4,000%, which are nuts, right? I'm just, people are trading so much, and I'm the only liquidity provider between 2 token pairs. If I was the only person there, in order for other people to join in making that liquidity pool with me, they would have to buy the tokens from me, then put them back into the liquidity pool. So I was fundamentally making the market for other market makers and making money the whole entire time it happened, right? And I would teach this stuff, and I would show people this is how you go out and make liquidity positions. So I'm hoping that I can convey enough attention and get enough people, to try to understand what we're doing here, and then also provide a clear path to all of the opportunity that we have. Because what's going to happen is the SPS token in total is going to get spread out. It's going to be tied to a lot more assets. And as those assets start to move, SPS token is going to be the intermediary for a lot of these market makers. And then that's how we'll start to see price adjustment, and that's how we'll start to see price move with the market. Now, I will say that most of our price movement has had a ton of downward pressure. And the reason that is because when you have a ton of liquidity all stuck in one spot, you only have surface level trade activity and you have deep liquidity, which is a downward pressure on the market. It just means that the money is not making money. Therefore, less people are enticed to buy it. And when you start to spread out those markets, it becomes much more volatile. But that volatility is actually a really great indicator of upward pressure, right? Which means that the price will move a lot. It'll move a lot more in each direction. But that's what you want to see, because that's where people who make markets make the most money. It's because you'll have volume, right? And we don't have the volume, although we might have it on Hive. That's not a big enough area for us to actually convey value, right? So I know I just went like really, really deep. I hope I'm not confusing the living daylights out of everybody here. But that's the idea, is that you spread it out and you'll get more movement and more trade volume. It'll just happen in smaller pools. And I don't think this is something that the DAO has to do, nor should the DAO be solely responsible for it. I think that we as a community should take more inherent value and start doing this, because ultimately it'll get us a higher yield on the actual holding of tokens and translating the token value when the market starts to do really well, ultimately making SPS worth a lot more, right? So, yeah, I think that is kind of the fundamental here is, in order for us to do that, we need to have bridging. And in order for us to do that portion of it, we need to have some kind of open source bridge that we can all tie into and allow the DAO to operate, but also allow people who want to do their own, conveyance of value to be able to bridge to other chains, right? And to get ahead of that, what that means is that the SPS token will need to have other variations of its smart contract launched on other chains, so that we have SPS or wrapped SPS available on different chains. Now, am I saying that we should do that for all chains? No, but we should be aware of what our capacity is to make markets, and understand, as a group or a community, that every time we take a position, that position has some kind of, how do I say this? Like, again, what I said early in this talk was a data-driven narrative, right? You're going to take a position in the market and you're going to probably share that position with people that you talk to, which is a form of social currency, which, inept of the value of something, is really a way to market something, right? It creates believers. It also creates positions in the market that people are tied to, and is a really great way to communicate things that are happening with SPS. And ultimately, I think what we'll see is that SPS will do a lot better because of that. Is that, I know that was a bit of a rant there, Clay. Hopefully I didn't lose anybody.
I don't know. Maybe you should like teach a class on this stuff or something. But
I probably should. Yeah, maybe I should. Yeah, here, maybe this will help. So I put together this proposal. Again, this is outside of Splinterlands, but this is something that I shared with everybody at Splinterlands. I'm going to post this.
so so I think let me try to like TLDR exactly like how this can work, right? And again, like in my mind, I'm thinking the DAO needs to start doing this for a couple of reasons. Like, I really think the DAO has to start making some money. Like one of the things that like I was focused on, like whenever I first started, was like I want to basically like I would like myself to be like a net neutral, like or at least like a net positive when it comes to like an expense on the DAO, right? That's one of the reasons why like I started really focusing on like, we need to get the DAO making money and like starting to explain things, right? But part of the problem is that like all the money the DAO makes right now, or like the vast majority of it, is in SPS and deck, right? And obviously, like there's no way for the DAO to just sell SPS or deck without putting downward pressure on the market. And this is where a lot of the hesitancy, resistance, everything comes from. So to me, I think the smart thing that we have to do is we have to look for ways for the DAO to basically utilize those assets in ways that like ultimately at the end of the day, anything you do is gonna equate to selling, right? But like there are smart ways to do it, right? This is one of the things that PJ was touching on, was the idea of like using one-sided LPs, right? So ultimately, like our goal is, you know, one, we want a healthy SPS token, right? So to kind of like give like an Eli 5 of what PJ is talking about there, right, is let's say the DAO goes out and gets like a like let's say the DAO wants to take $20,000 worth of SPS, right? Like I'm just throwing out a number, or like let's just use a flat number, like let's just say 100,000, right? So let's just say the DAO wants to take $100,000 of SPS and it wants to go open up positions to where it's going to basically create more value for the token. It's going to diversify the DAO's holdings, and ultimately, it should lead to a healthier overall, just like token economy for us, right? So, like, what we could do is we could go and say, like, we're going to put $20,000 of one sided liquidity for BTC, right? So, then what you do is you take $20,000 worth of SPS, you go to, like, let's just say we're going to go to Ethereum, we're going to go to Uniswap, and we're going to create a one-sided position to where $20,000 of SPS is out there, and we're only trading against wrapped BTC, right? So like that position will basically sit there until it's the most efficient, basically like the most efficient way to buy SPS on Ethereum, right? So like if you go to Uniswap and you're like, hey, I have this like $10,000 of USDC, and I want to buy SPS. Like what it's going to do is it's going to look for like should it route through the WETH SPS pool? Should it route through the WBTC SPS pool? Basically, whichever one has the better price, it's going to go there. It's going to buy the tokens, and then like you're not going to have to like keep up with everything that it's doing, but basically it's going to be buying wrapped BTC. It'll be putting it into that pool to where basically we're getting a balanced position over time, and you're getting your SPS. You don't even have to worry about it, right? But as these positions build out, right? Like let's go back to the original. Like let's say we wanted to do this with like $100,000 worth of SPS. Like let's say we got $20,000 for wrapped BTC. Like maybe we have $20,000 for DAI. Maybe we have $20,000 for USDT. The goal would be to split this up into different pairs so that ultimately what happens is regardless of whether or not people even want SPS, like at some point Uniswap's going to say like, oh wow, you want to trade USDC for USDT, let's go look at these routers and see what the most efficient route is, right? And at some point it's going to trigger those SPS positions. So like what'll happen is like you'll take your USDT or USDC whatever and you want to convert it, you're not going to be paying attention to how it's routing it, but on the like basically on the back end, it's going through our pools, it's creating volatility and it's creating volume for our token, but it's also earning fees for those positions, right? So if the DAO owns these positions, people that don't even care about SPS or don't even know about SPS can still be making money for the DAO. And that's one of the reasons why I'm saying, in my mind, we have to start exploring this because like I can think of like different ways that we can earn money, right? Like we can earn money on our LP positions, we can earn money on bridging, but ultimately it's going to all come down to the DAO has to like make decisions and has to execute on some of these plans. Otherwise, we kind of like remain stagnant, right? And like we're seeing some good momentum with like the current Conclave Arcana pre-sale, hopefully we can continue to carry that on with like land development. And I do feel like the token is getting to a healthier position as far as like we're soaking up some of the oversupply, we're creating more sinks, and it's not just all faucets. So all of this is good. But what we should also be doing at the same time is looking to make a healthier DeFi, looking to like basically expand our web into other ecosystems. Then we can start talking about like partnerships with I can't ever remember the name of the big decks on base. It's like some crazy name. But like we could start talking to like guys like that, right? Like we can say, hey, look, SPS is doing really good over here on Ethereum. SPS is doing really good on BSC. We rolled out the Optimism last week, and we've already got like obviously these are like future hypotheticals, but like when you get to the point you can be like, look, guys, like we're already doing millions of dollars in volume over here. We're doing millions of dollars in volume over here. Let's say we want to move into base and we want to start working with you guys. Can you help provide some liquidity? Can you offer us like some kind of incentives? Like it basically like the healthier our token is, the better position we are to negotiate everything, right? Like from negotiating exchange listings to negotiating partnerships to negotiating market makers. The healthier your token is, the more volume you have, the more people care to interact and look at what you're doing, right? Like whenever you have no volume, they just look at it and they say like there's no money to be made there, right? And like you have to think about it from the mentality of how these basically, well, in the terms of DEXs, it's just smart contracts and liquidity providers, right? Like all the money is in volume. When you look at exchanges, all the money is in volume, right? Like exchanges are taking like little tiny fees of every. Usually, like they either have maker or taker fees. Some of them have both. Some of them only do one sided. But basically, like let's say you go to, I want to say Binance is 0.25%. It's been a while since
Point
I've
zero two
actually
five,
checked.
yeah, point zero
Yeah,
two five percent, yeah.
right. So basically, like this is how Binance makes its money, right? Like Binance basically has tokens onboarded. They all have market makers. Like I can promise you, you're not getting on a big exchange like that without a market maker. Uh, the market makers are creating volume, however they want to do that. And basically, what happens is Binance is just sitting there taking its little tiny piece, right? So if you go onto a platform like Binance and you're doing $1 million of volume, they're just like looking at you like this isn't even really like worth our time, right? Because they got meme coins doing like $1 billion of volume a day. So like whenever we're sitting over here with like the greater crypto world thinking we only have $50,000 of volume on our token, like we're not worth their time and attention is basically what it boils down to. So like we have to make a healthier token, we have to make a healthier ecosystem, and there are ways we can do this, right? But like ultimately, like I said, it comes down to does the DAO want to pursue these options? Like I can make proposals, I can take the time to try to educate, I can have PJ jump in and try to educate. It's like this is just kind of like what we have to do. We have to explore our options.
And so I also want to say, like, it doesn't have to be the DAO. This should actually more or less be a part of the community itself too, right? Because that's where individuals, other than just the DAO, can earn on all of this as well. And the APRs and APYs are actually really high sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes you can make a lot of money really, really quick. Other times, if you leave it in there for a while, you'll make, a healthier APR, APY than you would on a savings account or even on some other assets, right? Um, but you're going to make markets in other places that the token currently doesn't have access to. And somebody from those markets is going to trade, right? And ultimately more and more people. So like, here's the other thing too. Like, let's just say that there's an XYZ token out there, which I know there probably is, right? But XYZ is another game, for example, right? And someone wants to trade their assets from XYZ in the Splinterlands. Well, how do they do that? Well, they got to go through and have some kind of triangular arbitrage occur on the exchange. And somebody from some third party asset is going to get paid for doing that, right? Or you could just make the market and provide the liquidity yourself. And now other people from other games can trade, seamlessly between those two asset pairs. And what you're going to notice is when one's doing really well, they'll trade into the other one to exit out. And that's going to bring the price of both assets up, right? Um, so for the most part, that's the idea, is that even though the DAO currently does some of this, it does not do a lot of it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the DAO. This should be something that everybody in the community understands as kind of a core. It's a core fundamental in how decentralized finance works. I know that's not the purpose of what Splinterlands is, obviously, but the DAO is based around a token. The value of that token is translated by the people who use it, and the tokens have utility. The more utility, the better, but also the more access, the better, right? It's the more shared decision, the better, right? So there's a couple questions in here about what we got going on. You mind if I kind of touch point on some of these questions real quick, Clay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so it says, can you clarify and this is coming from Splinterlands Land Guy. Can you clarify a plan is for all SPS and DEC? The community currently has liquidity pools? Question mark. Um, I think the plan is to just introduce more people into how this works so that they understand where the opportunities lie and help them make better educated decisions so that they can actually start doing some of this themselves. That's it. Like, period. Like, regardless of what the DAO does, individuals can participate without having the DAO be the primary source of funds. In fact, it's better when you have more people because more people equates to more volume and more activity rather than just having one massive market maker do all of this, right? Like, this isn't something that is solely it's not the sole responsibility of the DAO, right? You want to have the DAO participate, but it doesn't mean it has to be the sole bearer of the responsibility because then the DAO is the only one that's making money on this. Whereas what we want to see is individuals make money by doing this, people participating and making markets. And to be honest, the more people you have participating, the more people you have doing research to find opportunities. And when they find opportunities that convey very well, you're going to see more people talk about it. And more people talking about it as a narrative that all in all is better than marketing, right? Because it's actual real world value being translated, right? So that's the key here is that yes, the DAO is important, but the DAO doesn't have to be the only place where the liquidity comes from or the opportunities, right? Because when people start to make pools and they start to share those pools with other people and they start to talk about Splinterlands and they start to earn a little bit of yield here and there, they're going to talk about it, period. Humans innately share all of their successes and try to hide all of their failures. So when you start to make money, typically you're going to want to share that, right? Secondly, some other questions here. Would you consider quitting land? Oh, sorry, that is another question. Crazy idea. What you fellas think about the DAO owning a tract or region to produce some resources to add to liquidity pools? Why? Just if you already
So
own
PJ,
land.
PJ, let me
Yeah,
take this one. I think
yeah,
that
yeah,
we
yeah.
do not we don't want to create a situation where the DAO is competing against its own community like that.
Correct.
If you want my opinion, like flat out, I would say the DAO should not uh, like the DAO shouldn't be getting involved like in extracting resources from the community at that like that, right? Like I think that the DAO, the way that I would approach this, and it's kind of like what I was touching on earlier, is like there are ways that like as a DAO we can operate that actually protect and keep value inside of the ecosystem while making money for the DAO, right? Like like right now I can tell you like all you have to do is go look at like the BSC contracts, right? Like look at the bridge. You can follow where the settlement address goes, and you can look at how much money we basically pay to bridge SPS and how much money we pay to bridge deck. And it's not us paying, it's the community paying, right? So, like, the community is literally paying money every time you want to move money from BSC into the game, right? You're not paying it to us, you're not paying it to Splinterlands, you're paying it to a third party. So like, why would we not want the DAO to basically be like take the place of that third party to where the DAO is now capturing this value into the ecosystem, right? So instead of just paying some third party, then the DAO can start doing things like, you know, paying Jupiter or paying Cryptomancer, or, you know, like we can look for new partnerships. Like basically, there are just better ways to do the things that we're doing that aren't a net negative for the ecosystem, right? And now again, like I want to stress, like one of the things that I'm talking about here is like if we want to go out and we want to try to expand our DeFi presence and we want to try to start putting tokens out there and going for these like more aggressive DeFi strategies that should ultimately, you know, like the ultimate goal is lead to a healthier token overall. Like that does require putting some Splinterlands assets out onto the market, right? But again, I think the way you do it, like if we do it correctly with one-sided liquidity pools, it's not just like dumping tokens onto the market. Like yes, there will be a period where it's technically like that, like there's no way to put tokens on the market that isn't downward pressure. Like I'm just gonna be honest with you. Like I'm not gonna sit here and try to tell you it's not. But that said, there are ways to do it smartly and ways that like ultimately create value for the DAO that I think should offset any kind of like short-term pain. And again, like if you're gonna do this kind of things, you want to do it whenever the market's like at its most healthy, right? And right now we're starting to see some signs of life. I think like basically like right now my goal is just get you guys thinking and we can start having the conversations, right? Like I would like to I still think that there's a non-zero chance that we can like even if we don't sell out, we can still do a lot more in this pre-sale, right? Um, I don't know. I'm waiting to hear back, but I do think that we're going to get that recent proposal that passed to reduce the conversion fee into effect very quickly. So I don't know if it's going to be today or not, but I'm going to actually, after this call, I'm going to try to go follow up with that and see what's happening. But yeah, just like I want you guys to start thinking, maybe I'll put together some polls to figure out like what kind of amounts people would be willing to entertain putting out there, and then we can start making proposals to like set up pools. But again, like I said, like there's no like zero risk way to approach this stuff. There's no like way to just make money magically appear without doing some work and like taking a little bit of risk and stuff like that. But I do think there's smart ways to do it, and especially whenever we can capitalize on ways that like we're already seeing the community basically be extracted upon, then like literally all we have to do is turn that inside out to where now the community or the DAO is capturing that value instead of just paying it out. And I think ultimately like that just starting to take that mindset is that's how we win long term, right? Like I don't think we need to be looking at like how does the DAO outcompete players on land or like I like again like I don't think the DAO should be like one of the things like the DAO is sitting on like rebellion packs right now, right? Like I don't want to see the DAO start to like sell packs and compete with players, right? I don't want to see the DAO start to like sell Chaos Legion packs, stuff like that. Like the DAO basically has a partnership with Splinterlands whenever these new sets get released, and like the DAO's already like almost whole. Like I'm pretty sure the DAO's going to be whole on that 600 million deck by the time the pre-sale's over for sure. But again, like it's like this ultimately is how the DAO is bringing in its money, right? Like the DAO should be bringing in its money from these sales, like these partnerships, promos. We should be using these assets to make like other assets for the DAO. Like we don't need to go in and say like we're gonna corner the market on iron or something on land. We don't need to go start buying up all the tofus and then renting them out to new users. Like that's that's for the community to do. I don't think we need to get into a position to where the DAO is competing against players. Sorry, that's a bit of a rant, but like that's just not how I think about or approach this. Like I think about make it healthier, make it more sustainable. I don't think about it in the sense of like how do we outcompete the players.
So, and let me come back to this. Like, ultimately, the DAO is here to manage the will of the holders, right? It's not here to be the fallback for investment opportunities for everybody. That's not the case here, right? It is to basically be the way to enact what people vote for, right? And what they vote for with this. I think more importantly is to have people understand how this stuff works so that we have a more informed audience because that's how we find better opportunity. You can't rely on the DAO to do all this. You can't rely on individuals who already understand how to do this to go out and to perform all these actions, right? Um, that's not the case. Like the DAO is here to basically support the holders, right? And what the holders want to do. It's not. I mean, yeah, the DAO should be able to obviously make money, but ultimately it is here to support the people that hold the token and what they want to do. But I think that the way that we identify opportunity is by having a lot of people participate, and by having a lot of people participate, we can try a bunch of new things. Um, so yeah, and so when you start to participate in providing liquidity to markets, automated market makers are by far the best way to do that. And Um, if anybody wants to do that, you don't necessarily need the DAO to do that. You can take any of your funds and go and do that right now. There's nothing stopping you, right? Although I don't think that we have very many people that are familiar with how this works. It's something that can be taught. It's very easy to teach. It doesn't take a lot of time. There are pitfalls to all of this that you have to be aware of. So you don't necessarily want to go in and just start throwing money around because that will create problems. There are some fees that actually get brought up too when you start going to like more expensive chains like Ethereum. It can actually get pretty costly, but that's also where a majority of the liquidity is, right? You can make a position with SPS or DEC against any other third party pair or not pair, but token out there. So if there's other opportunities that people don't realize, you can be the first to make those opportunities, right? And to make those pools and take those positions. And what's kind of cool is because it's all decentralized and all the transactions are basically transparent, what happens is people who watch those charts or people that have any kind of analytics set up to look at where the highest yielding pools are, they will be watching the APRs on those token pairs. And once they start to see token pairs that start to generate a really good yield, they'll start to participate themselves, right? So ultimately, that's what we want to see. We want to see, again, we want to see SPS take up a higher share of decision. The more spread out the SPS token is, the more volatility there is, which means the more price movement there will be, right? The more price movement there is means that you'll have speculators come in and speculate on the token. The more speculators you have come in, the more volume you do, which means you'll bring in the liquidity providers behind them, right? So I hate to say it, but like we don't do any of that. And we have some really, really good opportunities because Hive doesn't have a lot of that either. So, I think in that presentation that I put up there, I actually created that presentation back in 2022 when I first started at Splinterlands. Have updated it a couple times, but if you look, the idea is to actually do some of this with Hive because again, that helps both communities out. It's not just us. I think that Hive would benefit greatly from this as well, right? And I know a lot of people here in our community are holders of Hive, right? So participating in both tokens doing this just creates more opportunity and creates more share of decision amongst both of those. And together, we actually have a relatively large base to do something like this. Now, what it is, I don't know because I'm not driving the narrative. I'm just here to teach, right? But community members ultimately can start to figure this out. And I think guilds, like I'll give you an example, right? Back in the day, when I say the day, this is like 2022, so not even that long ago. Um, One of the things that we did early on was there was an NFT project called NFT Worlds, and we had a guild that had its own token. And what happened was we pooled our guild token with NFT Worlds, and people started trading in and out of NFT Worlds. But because there wasn't a lot of liquidity positions available for them to trade in and out, and our guild token had access to Ethereum and to USDC, it became basically the intermediary token for triangular arbitrage or for people to trade out of the token. And we ended up doing 100% in a single day on like a $17,000 position. So we made like 17 grand on our money by doing that. Again, it's because it was the only access or one of the only access routes out of the token. And I think NFT Worlds, if you guys were ever a part of that, did like, I don't know, 70 million or $80 million in transactions that day. And because our guild token was like one of the only exit ramps on there, we ended up selling a ton of our token in exchange for USDC, and it worked really well, right? So again, the DAO doesn't necessarily need to do that, right? We have enough eyeballs as a community, like even with just the 15 people here in Discord, right? You could actually go out and make a lot of versatility in pools and have a lot of liquidity that creates the capacity for more markets and more people to enter. And if you're like me, obviously I think the price of Bitcoin is going to go up. It's just a matter of time, right? When consumers have more time and money to spend. which will hopefully be soon. I mean, we always hope that it's soon, but again, nobody really knows. But ideally, what will happen is SPS being tied to more of those assets and created as a basis for exchange across triangular arbitrage would actually start to move the token up, just like we see with everything else, right? We'll have more of a surface to trade against, right? And eventually, one of those pools is going to move the price up because it's going to be the cheapest way for the automated market makers to trade and to route through. And then once the token starts to move up in one pool, people are going to trade from that pool into another pool, and they're going to see the opportunity. And you'll start to see the volatility and the price movement start to take a hold, right? I think that this is not only is it good for us as individuals to take a hold and start trying to look at how to do this. There's a ton of resources that are already available about how to create liquidity positions on Uniswap or any automated market maker. The first thing we need to do is create the bridging and make affordable bridging that is part of a deep liquidity position, which would definitely be the DAO. But individual guilds could also do this because guilds technically, the way I look at guilds, they're kind of like the, what are they called? Like the community banks, basically, right? The credit unions of DeFi, right? A bunch of people get together, they pool their funds together for a common purpose, and then they basically use that liquidity to basically earn fees and to work together, right? Or to buy assets, whatever it is, right? Anyways, it's a whole other story. But what we'll start to see happen is we'll see the price movement of SPS. It'll thin out the deep liquidity position that we have on Hive. It'll move us out to other chains, which means more people will have access to SPS tokens. More people will be able to take advantage of price movements. And that ultimately helps everybody in the community that's holding SPS. It also helps the DAO because now the DAO doesn't have to be the single source of liquidity. The DAO can do what it does best, which is governs, right? So ultimately, like that's what we want to see, right? Let me see. There's some other questions. DAO is a legal entity right now. It's a nonprofit entity that with the goal to support Splinterlands in the SPS ecosystem. If it becomes a for-profit entity, the profit-sharing token owners, I think it's not a stretch that the governments step in. That's not, So like a nonprofit can make money. It's just purpose can't be to make a profit, right? Like if a nonprofit has costs associated with it, then it's okay. It just can't make a profit, right? So it can spend money on expenses. At the end of the year, it should be donating back whatever profits it doesn't use or holding it in, in trust, basically. But that's also the difference between like a 501c3 and there's 501(b) and there's a bunch of different types of legal entities that are out there. Actually, and I hate to say this, but like, you guys remember when the Maui fires happened? And then Oprah Winfrey and The Rock went out and they were like, hey, donate a bunch of money to our nonprofit. And then they had the person who was managing the nonprofit was making like $600,000 a year, right? That's not what we're doing here, right? The DAO legitimately has expenses that it needs to pay for. It doesn't mean it always has to be a burn. If anything, it should be a sink, right? Meaning that it should make as much as it needs in order to operate. And then everything else should go towards the conveyance of value to the community members and to the people who hold the token, right? So they are allowed to make money. They're just not allowed to do it for profitable purposes, right? Else it does have to pay tax on anything it does make, just like anything else, right? So, anywho, there's also a difference between like trusts and everything else.
All I'm gonna say is like it's a very complicated situation, and we're just gonna leave it at that because I don't think the people that are discussing it understand what they're talking about. There's different jurisdictions. There's a whole lot of different things to consider, and suffice it to say, lawyers were involved in how everything is set up, and not something to really worry about at this point like that. I would say.
Maybe I should preface this again by saying this is not investment advice, and I'm not a lawyer or a certified investment advisor. But I can tell you what I do know to some extent on, but I'm not, again, I wouldn't say that this is legal advice by any means, but for the most part, I do know that nonprofits can actually make money. They just aren't there to make a profit, right? So
Yeah, and just for the
again,
record, like the DAO isn't trying to set up any kind of like pooling resources, profit sharing thing. So I don't even know like why all that got started. But that's it's not what we're discussing here. Just to make that
nope.
clear.
Yeah, if anything, the DAO is here to provide the liquidity between these different transactions and to make sure that the ecosystem is healthy. But we as individuals uh, have opportunities that grant us the ability to go out and make liquidity positions ourselves, right? So that all of those opportunities are just there. I just don't think a lot of people understand how to do it. I think it would be great and behoove us to actually learn more about how to do this. There are some people who are extremely intelligent in our community who do a lot of this stuff as their day job, right? I've talked to quite a few of them. We have people in our community who are working on extremely complicated decentralized finance projects, but they don't bring it in here, and it's not necessarily their job to commingle the two ideologies. But we as a community always wonder, why does the token always have this downward pressure? And it's because we're not really doing anything to promote it ourselves, and we're not participating in any of the market making. We're kind of relying on the game and the DAO to do that. And it shouldn't be the responsibility of the DAO or the game to do that. The game should focus on being fun, and the DAO should focus on the governance of the token. We, the community members, should be the ones taking advantage of the opportunities that are out there, right? So, yeah, I don't even know if it's insurance for providing liquidity necessarily, but that's a good way of kind of understanding a portion of what it should be. It's more or less, it's the governance of the token. Right. So the other problem with being the insurance policy is the only person that really protects are the whales. Right. So it just means that if a whale wants to leave, they can just go get all their money from the DAO and bounce. Right. And that's not necessarily a good thing either, because then it doesn't, that capital isn't out there basically supporting the community. It's supporting just people who have a ton of money. Right. Um, so again, like I don't have the ability to sit here and say this is what the DAO should do and this is what everybody should do. You guys got to do it, right? I'm here to help. I'm a resource. I've done a ton of this stuff. I would love to teach this stuff, right? I already do teach this stuff, actually, right? And granted the opportunity, I would spend more time here helping you guys understand this stuff and show you how it works, right? Um, there's other ways that you can do this too. There's other opportunities that exist out there. Again, I really appreciate this community. And someone had asked me why I do this. It's because Splinterlands itself, believe it or not, even with the number of players that we've lost, is still one of the most used decentralized applications in the world. And through, I'm like a very hardcore libertarian, right? I think that we shouldn't be dependent on banks or any of these people in this day and age, that we have the ability to do this stuff, and people who will be financially sound in my generation and generations that come after me are inherently going to learn how to do this stuff, right? The older generations are kind of used to how this stuff works. It's kind of funny, like I live out here in Southern California, and we have a bunch of Indian casinos, right? And I I go to casinos, like I'll be at one tonight actually, because we're gonna probably go. Or I was there last weekend, just kind of having dinner at one of the local Indian casinos because they're huge, they're massive out here, right? And I see all of these older people sitting at slot machines, and I'm thinking, like, what the hell? Like, how do people just sit here and press a button and just watch a screen and take risk? And I'm watching people spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars. These casinos are making millions of dollars a day on these older generations that are coming to just sit there and press a button and look at a screen. And because the way that the attention span works for the older generations, that's like playing video games to them, right? They didn't have all of this high fidelity, high interactive stuff going on that requires, extreme amounts of attention. They were playing much more analog style games back in the day, and that's what they're used to, right? And so I think younger generations, slot machines will probably fall by the wayside because they're not just going to sit there and press buttons over and over again. they're used to having a PlayStation controller in their hand, or a joystick, or a keyboard, right? They're used to this multi-dimensional type of gameplay that happens, right? So slot machines, if I had to hedge against it, are going to fall off because the generations that are used to that type of analog interaction are getting older and older and older, right? So I think that what we have here is an opportunity as coming generations to take advantage of this and understand how this stuff works. Again, I will say guilds, if you think about what a guild is today, it's like a credit union, right? A credit union, at least in the sense here in America, is a bunch of individuals who get together and they put their savings together into deposits. And then they use that savings to make savings and loans, and they all share on the upside, right? It's almost like a DAO, right? In a sense, right? Guilds are the same thing, but they do it for games, or they do it for projects, right? A guild comes together, they all have a like purpose, they all understand something. They elect people to represent them. They put their savings into the guild, and then they use that to either bring assets to the people who are doing that, or they're using it to make a profit, right? And that's what happens. You have these concentrations of younger generations who understand certain aspects of the market, who come together because they have a shared commonality, and they start to provide value for each other. In doing so, they become better. They become smarter. They have more opportunities. They understand things and are technically more lean than the large organizations that used to have to do this stuff in the past. That to me is true decentralization, right? And it also creates opportunity in the fold that are just far greater than anything that exists currently. And that's the colorful nature of what happens in decentralization, right? And I think that we have a lot of guilds here in Splinterlands. We have a huge amount of reach here at Splinterlands. And to take advantage of that, our DAO has a ton of liquidity, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that the DAO has to be the ones doing it. We should be doing this stuff. We should be talking to our guild members and telling them, hey, have you thought about putting out our own token and pairing it with SPS? Or have we thought about launching a bridge with our tokens to bridge against SPS? Have we talked to anybody from Hive who would want to participate in making markets? Have we talked to anybody from these other chains to see if they would want to participate in this, right? So the opportunities are vast. I know I've been harping on this for a minute now. Hopefully, I have done a good job of trying to get people hyped up about what we can do here. I think this is just one. Again, this is just one method of syncing token value to what happens in the general market or the broad market. But damn, this stuff is fun, and you learn a lot. And what you'll find out again is that it is a form of social currency. Humans innately share their wins, they don't share their losses. So when they start to take positions, they want everybody to participate. I think it's some of the cheapest marketing dollars that you can afford. And if we wanted to do this as a community, we have everything available to us. It's already there, right? So, yeah, Clay, I think this has been a really, really great conversation. I'm not sure. I think I've spent all I have for today. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on, or any questions that you guys might have had?
So I guess like one thing that we should probably uh try to figure out is like, so what kind of time frame do you think we're looking at to get like decentralized bridging set up?
So we are feeling very confident in what we're doing with validators. The first thing we need to do is get some proposals about what else there is to do. I think that there are some other things that validators should be doing, although that's my personal opinion. We can have another conversation about that, and I'd be happy to come back anytime to talk about it. But there are some things that Jupiter can do for the DAO, as far as creating bridges, creating smart contracts, making sure that we can commute value between different chains, launching SPS token on other chains, and making sure that we have a good wrapped contract that takes care of all the stuff that's vetted. We need to get some proposals up. We need to figure out what the community wants to do, right? And where they're going to support us. I mean, granted, I would love to continue to work on these things for a very long time with the DAO. it just all has to kind of fall in place, and we need to figure out what we want to do and where we want to focus. As far as coming in and educating people, I'll do that regardless. Like, um, I think it's important. I love to do this stuff. It helps me. I would do it for free. Like, it's not going to cost anything. I would just come in and hopefully teach people on how to make liquidity positions and how to provide liquidity. Um, yeah, and then ultimately, just have a better, more educated audience that can take this information and share it with their communities as well, and show them how to do it, and just kind of make us more of a resource than anything else. I would be happy to do that, and I would love to spend some time with you guys. And I would say invite everybody you possibly can so that we can sit here and talk about how to do this stuff. And then we need people who are just going to, like, I would love to see people participate in actually sharing opportunities. So if someone finds a pool or a project that they think would be really good to make some liquidity with, and let's do it. Let's test. I mean, it doesn't take a lot. I mean, even you put $100 in or $10 in, depending on the chain, doesn't really matter, right? Um, I see a couple questions here too. So the first one is from OAA. I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce that or if it's a acronym. I apologize. So do you have a solution for the problem that so much liquidity happens on Hive, but the volume isn't on the main chain? Yeah, if you take a look at that deck, I'll send a link again for everybody that is here. I'll post the link one more time. Look at the Hive markets deck right there. I just posted it in the town hall. Yeah, just take a look at it. Just go through it. It basically just says, like, you spread out the liquidity, you make it against other pools and pairs, and basically what will happen is you're going to bridge it to other chains, and there's a lot of different chains out there that are EVMs. Um, I think this is great, right? Like, this is just me sharing what I think would be ideal. You don't want to do it across all the different chains at once. We would probably start with like BSC or Binance Smart Chain because that's where we already are. But we could pick all the major pairs. Like, I know we have a wrapped ETH pool. There's a wrapped BNB pool, but there could be a better BTC pool, right? So if someone wanted to convert some SPS into BTC or some DEC into BTC, you can make a single-sided position over there and start to do that. I think that anybody that's a part of Hive should be considering this as well. If you own a lot of Hive, they should be absolutely considering doing this and doing it with us, because those two token pairs together, although they transact a lot here on Hive, we should absolutely be including them in this because it helps both of us, right? Or I say
Yep.
we, as the royal we, right? So anybody that's a part of the Hive community should absolutely consider involving them in sharing this information and making sure that everybody from Hive understands what we're trying to do if we decide to do this, right? Or what my narrative is, at least, right? Um, but yeah, the problem is that we have everything concentrated on Hive. If we spread it out, we'll have more volatility. Volatility brings speculators. Speculators bring liquidity providers. That's the chain of events, right? So I think that is, again, the idea here. Azarcon, always good to hear from you, buddy. Can we have a written suggestion? I don't want to call it a proposal yet. It's some of this you can look into, get community buy-in before we run the proposal. Take a look at the deck, dude. Hopefully that's enough. I don't know. It's up to you guys, really. My position should absolutely be neutral in all of this, and this is something that I stressed when I came to Splinterlands, that my opinion would never be reflected on what I hold in the community. So what I own shouldn't affect my decision making. I have been patiently sitting on the sidelines watching all this stuff happen with an abject responsibility to myself. Like, I'm not beholden to my own assets here. I do it strictly because I am a third party that can look without the value of something affecting my decision making. That is one of the key things, that one of the core tenets of me being a CTO, right? Because I have ultimately the access to build anything. And if I built things that only made me money, I would be screwing everybody over. So I have no abject responsibility here to to do this. I'm here to teach. I'm here to help. But I want to know what you guys want to do, and hopefully you can appreciate that. Secondly, I can put some more stuff together. Obviously, the bridge would be probably the biggest one I see being of value. And then there's some other DEC stuff that we should focus on too. Absolutely. Other things. Um, let's see. The bridge is enough. Yeah, the bridge is a start, right? We could. I mean, there's other asset like you can. Man, I don't know if I want to announce, but like one of our whales here is creating DeFi, uh, real world lending stuff. Oh my God, there's some cool stuff we could do. I'm not going to say who. I've talked to him in the past. We had a really great conversation. If we just took some of that and applied it to NFTs in the game and did some cool stuff, there's some really, really, I would say more technical, but really amazing stuff that could happen. Um, yeah, I don't realistically want to put anybody under that type of pressure yet, but there's some really good alternative things, or I would say ancillary things that we can do that would bring a ton of value and also just some really cool opportunities to the table for everybody. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so sorry.
Do do you I don't know, maybe we should start doing these a little bit more frequently.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
That,
Absolutely. And I think we should have some other people participate too,
yeah.
rather than me just sitting up here shouting from the rooftops.
Yeah. I mean, I
And
think
you could too.
yeah, I think currently, like current game plan should be well, yeah, obviously you guys are working on the bridge stuff, but what I'll do is I'll start like throwing some numbers together, and I can like work on like shopping around, kind of like what I'm thinking about how we can like expand into different positions. But again, like to kind of like reiterate on the question, like the bridge is like a first order effect. Like we're talking about like third order effects here. Like it's not just the bridge. It's not just like the creating positions. Like we're talking about getting to the point where while yes, most of our volume is isolated in like a hive kind of like a silo over here. But what we're getting at is you can do this in ways to where it doesn't even matter what they're doing. Like you understand, like we can do this in ways to where people that are just wanting to swap DAI for wrapped BTC on Ethereum are still ultimately like adding value to SPS. Like that's kind of like the whole point of what we were trying to get at earlier is like you can set up positions in ways that like people don't even have to know they're touching SPS. And that's kind of like what we're getting at. So like, are the bridges enough? No. Are the positions enough? No. But like everything together kind of creates this overarching web that is kind of like getting at what we've been talking about here of like how do you expand, how do you create a healthier token. It's not just like you can't just do one thing and it magically fixes it. You have to have a strategy. You have to have some kind of like idea of like how this stuff works, which is what we're trying to do here now is just kind of like PJ is kind of giving you guys like the high level DeFi education here. Like most of my stuff, I just like basically learned from practice, trial and error. But like PJ actually like teaches classes on this stuff. So like again, we're trying to kind of give like high level explanations of how this stuff works, how it can play out, and yeah, like there are strategies that we can put in place that I think ultimately will lead to a healthier token, a healthier ecosystem, and there are ways for the DAO and the community to capture more value for itself instead of like basically just offloading it. And some of that is like in bridging, some of that is in LPs. Like there are ways that we can make smart moves that yeah, like that's kind of the whole gist of what we were trying to get at here today. But yeah, PJ, I know you're a busy guy, but yeah, what? we can try to do these more often. I think that ultimately, like that's what we have to do, right? Because like it's going to come down to education. Like I've talked about some of these issues in the past, and I've tried to like make suggestions, but again, like part of the problem is sometimes like we're just too close to these things, right? And again, like whenever we're talking about having like the DAO taking over bridging, or we're talking about like having the DAO take over LPs, like even if it is like the smart, healthier, like long-term play for the ecosystem, it doesn't mean that there aren't like short-term pains for people. Like there are people that have funds and liquidity pools, right? Like Splinterlands Lane guy was saying earlier, like I have funds in the V2 pool that's gonna like no longer be getting incentives in a few days or whatever, right? And again, like it's not like we do these things, or like I don't think the DAO should like make these kind of like choices or decisions of like some way of like we need to just stop spending those tokens, or we need to punish people or anything like that. It's just how do we make a healthier, more sustainable ecosystem? And to me, like that's always my approach, right? It's not like what's best for one person, like what's best for me personally, like anything like that. It's like overall, I think that's the big picture we have to be looking at, is like how do we make this thing sustainable so that it's still viable in like 10 years, 20 years. I would love for this project to be around for the rest of my life. And I mean, will it be? I don't know. I
Same.
mean, like it's hard to like you know, but I mean, I think if we make smart moves and we keep growing, I think that there's potential for this thing to be around for a long time. I mean, we're basically doing something that's like never been done before, right? And I mean, like if you hear Matt's like vision, right? Like, I mean, Matt basically wants the DAO at some point like running this whole thing, right? I mean, do you think that's a fair assessment of the situation, PJ? Like, I mean,
Oh,
my
yeah, yeah,
conversations,
oh yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, he is all about having this whole thing manage itself, right? Like
right,
yeah, his idea, that's the whole reason of setting this stuff up the way that it was all set up, is to allow the community to ultimately decide where it wants to go and not have all of the decision making rest on his shoulders at all. And the game should lead itself, right? So yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Um, and the math checks out. I mean, look at other projects that are basically well diversified in their pools. If you just go and look at the correlation between their token and Bitcoin, you'll see that they trail, right? And that's because they're diversified. And that's just how it works. I mean, I don't know what else to say. That's just the fact of the matter, right? And we have enough people here that we could ultimately do a very good job and make these markets for sure. There's more than enough here. And obviously, based on the pre-sale, like there's a lot of money in this community. And not saying that that necessarily has to go all towards LP, but that money can ultimately help everybody here, and it doesn't just have to be the DAO, right? So I would like to see that happen. I would love to teach this stuff and get more into the weeds and show people how to do this. Again, I think a more informed community is a stronger community altogether. I look forward to it, and hopefully, I can dig some time out a couple Fridays for the next couple months, or the next couple weeks. I don't know. We'll see what the schedule looks like.
yeah.
But
Well,
I can come in and do more detailed presentations on how this would work.
yeah, I mean, I can make myself available, so I'll get with you. We'll figure out some times, and also like if we need to, like we can actually do like meets to where you can like do screen share and everything. But yeah, so guys, I will discuss with PJ, and we'll try to lock in some more times, and I will let you guys know when we can. But I want to say thanks everybody for joining us. I know we're coming up on 2 hours here, and I'm pretty sure PJ's gonna get back to doing the Cody dev stuff.
Yeah. Also, check out the website. Don't forget, we create
Yeah,
spsdao.com.
Yeah.
If you didn't get a chance, just go hit it. And then we got a couple more updates coming on, so please don't judge. But
Yeah.
love you guys. Appreciate all the support and looking forward to doing this. And yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
thank you again, Clay. You're always the funnest to talk to you. Appreciate you and all the hard work you do. You are definitely the man behind the scenes holding it all together. So
Yeah. Well, just I mean, I think ultimately it takes a village, man. And there's I don't know. I know a lot of people just like don't even know just like how many people behind the scenes are always working on stuff. And yeah, guys, for like we've got a lot more cool stuff coming. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing all the valuable info, PJ. And like I said, I'll try to set up some more calls. And of course, I'm still working on trying to get the payment processor stuff set up, and I will put together some kind of like number crunching and start shopping it around. But I do think the DAO is going to have to start making some moves sooner or later. And again, like I kind of wanted to start this stuff like a year ago, but there's always other things to focus on. But I do think that like now that we're Conclave Arcana's kind of getting to that finish line, like that's something else. Like I know a lot of people don't realize, but I've had to spend like a lot of the last like 4 to 5 months really helping with that because ultimately like this is a big project for the DAO. The company's like leading the charge on like all the creative and everything, but I've been trying to help be involved with that to make sure that we're getting a really good quality set. And it's been a busy few months, but honestly, man, I feel like we're finally everything's kind of going in the right direction. I'm really excited about the
yeah.
future, and I think it's gonna all be worth it in the end.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I had to post that meme because it was just funny Starship Troopers moment. But I'm doing
Uh,
my part. Right?
I
Yeah,
love Starship
so
Troopers.
I did too. I heard they're remaking a new version
Uh,
of it. Like that's going to be a big production versus the smaller ones that they had afterwards.
we'll,
But
we'll 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 see,
again,
man. Like I mean, like
yeah,
that
we'll
that
see.
like
We'll see.
like imagine they're trying to remake Tropic Thunder in like 2025, right? Like I just
Oh,
okay,
dude.
guys.
Oh, man. All right,
Yeah,
fellas and
thanks, guys.
ladies. Appreciate you all. Thank you very much. And
Yeah,
hopefully see you guys here soon.
sure. Later, guys.
Later.